If every date feels like a disaster and you are starting to get hopeless, it's time to face the harsh truth. It's not them, it's you. So let's learn how to fix it. I see so many bad date story times every single day on my For You page, and I've started to notice a few things that all of these videos have in common. The girlies are not being selective enough before they even go on the date. If you're getting really frustrated with dating and feel like there's just nobody out there for you, I think where you should first start is look at how you're vetting these guys before you even agree to a date. I will see so many story times where the girl will list like 5 red flags and then be like, so then we went on the date. A lot of times the answer and the red flags are there before you even have to get involved with them. And a lot of the times the initial little red flags are actually clues into how the relationship with this person will go later on. You teach people how to treat you, and you can also tell a lot from somebody, especially a man, from the first initial interactions. And it's really about getting hip to these subtle clues. With this, it's also really important to not get too emotionally attached, or literally emotionally attached at all, before somebody has proven themselves to you. This is not about withholding emotion in a way that makes you cold, or it's not about having an avoidant attachment style, but instead it's just about safety, protecting your time, your energy. Somebody really needs to prove themselves to you through consistent action, what type of person they are, especially if it's a man, what type of man they are and how they're going to treat you. And a lot of guys prey on women that are overly emotional and desperate and just want a partner so badly. They become the perfect guy that you fall for through love bombing, telling you everything you want to hear. You think, wow, finally I found someone, wow, this guy's different. And then every time you're surprised when they show their true colors, whether that's through disrespecting you, ghosting you, stringing you along. It takes being obsessed with yourself and your own life and having your own goals, hobbies, friends, social life outside of a guy or outside of dating. And honestly, a very careful and low-key detailed analysis of how someone is treating you and how, the interactions are going. Sometimes it's the littlest detail in even one message that will kind of give you a clue as to what type of guy this is. And I say be very detailed because, of course, if someone were to approach you and have these huge obvious red flags, majority of y'all out there, I'm sure, you're a smart girl. You're not going to fall for somebody that's openly disrespecting you, at least in the initial stages. They gotta work to that. So that's why it's important to pay attention to red flags like love bombing, excessive, admiration, compliments. So it also comes down to being strict. Take your time in getting to know someone, and this is why it's so important to not come from a place of desperation. I recently started watching Insecure when I was on a flight home. I had always seen posts about, watching Insecure in your later 20s versus your early 20s hits so different, and it's so true. On one hand, it's just growing up, your brain developing, going through different experiences. The show hits different, but I think also having watched so much Sheer 7 content and leveling up and kind of learning these different ways to date and to date a little more smart, it's really crazy to rewatch the show now and just see how, especially in the early seasons, how much Molly and Issa are acting out of desperation. As I said earlier, you teach people how to treat you. Whether we're talking about you or somebody else, it's actions over words every time. In season 2, Molly starts kind of a friends with benefits situation with her childhood friend who is married to another woman. It gets to a point where she makes this speech to him where she's like, I can't do this anymore. It's not right. We're either just sleeping together or just friends. It's literally the next day, I think, after they sleep together, having come to this new agreement, he calls her and just wants to check in with her about her job and chit chat, and she's like, I told you we can't do this. But then he's like, oh, well, we can go out and celebrate as friends. And you can see her hesitating, but then she ultimately agrees. You can tell this is not a situation that she is ultimately benefiting from. She's already getting her feelings hurt every time he brings up his wife, yet she's so desperate for a relationship of any kind that that's what she settles for. I think that moment is so significant because it's something a lot of us can relate to. You've probably had a situation where you knew that, going to that guy's house or settling for a Netflix and chill is not optimal. It's not what you truly want, but maybe you just really like the guy, like, oh, like maybe just one more chance, or like it can't be that bad, I'll just go once, and then you ultimately end up regretting it. The idea of decentering men has also been a very popular social media trend, I want to say, or just talked about topic. While some women are taking this as refraining from dating, a little more of like heading towards the 4B approach, I do think there's also a way to date men while decentering them. And I think this just looks like prioritizing yourself and putting more emphasis in your life on your, friendships, female friendships, your family, your job, your own hobbies, your own travel, and just your own life, yourself. Not settling or sleeping with any man that's not ultimately benefiting your life. I personally think that if you are going to date men, that's kind of the only way to go about it, because you just don't want to get yourself in a bad situation. And a bad situation could be anything from DV later down the line, an abusive relationship, an emotionally abusive relationship, to even just this sadly really common reality that a lot of women in our current society face when marrying a man, which is just kind of a lack of recognition, for household tasks, frustration, the feeling of having to parent a grown adult man, and just dealing with that everyday frustration, which honestly kind of seems like a nightmare. And I truly think the only way to avoid that is to low-key put yourself on a pedestal and become obsessed with yourself. And again, don't settle. Don't do things for the plot. If you're getting some red flags from someone before you go on a date with them, don't just go to maybe it'll be different. I'm bored tonight. I just want to get out. So often in situations like that as well, your guard is down because in your mind you're kind of saying it's not that serious, but a lot of the times that can be when you end up getting the most hurt because you weren't going into the experience with intention and with clear boundaries. I know my worth and I'm not gonna settle. I also found this article from The Cut that I believe I actually talked about last year, but it's very relevant still. I'll link it down below. And the article starts out with a story a girl told in a TikTok of how she went out to try to meet some people. She sat at the bar. This older man offered to buy her dinner like right away, but she was like, ew, no. Let me go somewhere where there's younger people. She went to a comedy show. It was kind of empty in there. She got made fun of for being alone by the comic on stage, and then she takes the Uber home, and it's an old lady driving the Uber, and she's like, this is gonna be me. Let me tell you where this girl went wrong. If you're uncomfortable talking to an older man, that's fine. I know there's creators that will specifically say you should date an older guy. I just think, honestly, some older guys are just as bad, if not worse, than younger guys. It just really depends on the person, on the specific man, his values, how he was raised, all of that. But with this being said, if someone's offering to buy you dinner, it's like, if it were me and I'm just going out by myself to have an experience, to me, it's like, you never know who you might meet. Like maybe that old man owned the restaurant. Maybe he knew the owner. Maybe he knows someone else that, could be interesting for you to know later down the line. So on one hand, it's like, don't block your blessings. And I think also when you have clear boundaries within yourself, you are comfortable saying no, you know how to leave a situation, basic street smarts, like not accepting a drink from a random unless you see the bartender make it and hand it to you. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a little chit chat and meeting people if that's what you're there to do, because again, you just never know what could happen, in a good way. In a bad way, but we know our street smarts and we have boundaries, and we're not going to go along with something we're uncomfortable with to be polite. And then she went to meet younger people at a comedy show, which that's not really a social environment. That's somewhere you go with your friends or on a date. So it was kind of no wonder nobody talked to her, or she felt like, oh, I'm sitting by herself. If she wanted to do that, she should have done it because that's something she wanted to do. And that's the thing. I think, people hear this advice of go out by yourself to meet people, and a lot of these girls are showing up in these places with kind of that air of desperation, or looking around who am I gonna talk to, when instead you need to be going for yourself. And the energy shift is just so different, because if you're going somewhere by yourself, you're relaxed, you're confident, you're talking with the waiter or the bartender, it just gives off such a different energy than going somewhere I want to meet someone, and you just kind of give desperate, maybe kind of shy, insecure, and someone's less likely to approach you if you are exuding that energy. So with that being said, if she wanted to go to a comedy show, she should have just gone because she wanted to go. It doesn't matter if I meet anyone, but then it's you're going because you want to, so you're happy, you're in a good mood, you're not desperate, you're enjoying yourself. If the comic is making fun of you or calling you out, making jokes, you would be laughing, hopefully they're not literally mean, but it would just be such a different energy. Maybe someone would approach you afterwards, or who's to say, but it doesn't even matter because you were doing it for you. If you did want to be social that night, which I think, wanting to just be around people, even that gives off a different energy than I want to go meet someone, because that just gives desperation. Like, no, you have to go out, enjoy yourself, enjoy the city, enjoy the restaurant, the bar, whatever. It doesn't necessarily matter the outcome other than me getting home safely. You know, I don't need to meet the love of my life tonight. She should have gone somewhere else then, where it would have been a little easier to talk to people, talk to the bartender, you know, sit at a bar like she originally did. This is giving desperate. When you are confident in yourself, when you've leveled up your looks, when you smell good, when you're not afraid to look people in the eye, when you have kind of just like that grounded, confident energy, people are way more likely to talk to you. And it's definitely something that you can practice, you know, but I think ultimately the goal should be, I want a well-rounded life. I want a well-rounded social life. I want to explore new things to do, new restaurants, bars, you know, comedy shows in my city. And I'm doing this because I'm building a life that I love, and not because I'm just so desperate to meet someone. I'm just going out like a little scared deer in the headlights. Also, when you do have that desperate energy, it is only going to attract men who want to take advantage of that. And it just comes across as you're really easy to manipulate because you'll settle for anything. So they don't even have to love bomb you that much to like trick you and get you emotionally attached. Going back to decentering men, I think it's also very easy to lose that air of desperation when you realize the reality of the relationships that a lot of women do have with men. I remember back in the day, you know, when people were starting to couple up in high school and whatnot, thinking like everyone had high standards. Like, wow, like if they're in a relationship, he must be acting right. He must know how to do this. Like, he must be amazing. That's unfortunately just not the reality a lot of the time. Whether you have examples in your own life of like, you know, someone's like your friend's boyfriend that you hate, or you see a video on your For You page of like, clothes my husband left around the house this week, the weaponized incompetence, you kind of realize like my peace is more important. And that's not to say, unless you want to, of course, that you have to go like full B, never date again. But it's like, you can date in a way where you're selective and you're enjoying yourself and you're putting yourself as a priority. Because that's the thing too, when you are being selective and only selecting the best guys that, you know, want to take you on whatever type of date you want to go on. Okay, so if that's how I want to date, that's the only way I'm gonna date. So I don't need to be stressed out. And it's not this stressful, you know, experience where, oh my god, does he like me? When you don't go into it with desperation, I think that's when you can truly have fun and enjoy yourself. But of course, like, boundaries strong, that doesn't mean just free for all. You know, you got to be selective. You got to be able to say no. That doesn't mean you won't still be tested by these guys. You'll have a better experience than if you're just kind of settling for anyone that wants to take you to a freaking walk date. So if you need to take time off dating to focus on yourself, level up, practice even just like showing up to public spaces, restaurants, bars by yourself with literally no intention of doing anything. Just like literally you can go bring a book, you know, do some work on your phone just so you can get comfortable in your own energy. The grass is not always greener. If you're around my age, you know, in your later 20s, a lot of people are starting to get engaged, get married, have kids, and it's not, you know, a teen pregnancy, married straight out of high school, like super religious people from school vibe. Like, it's like, we're really at that age. There can definitely be a pressure, you know, like, should I be doing that? I kind of thought I should be traveling and having fun at this age, but like, there's so many people I know getting married. What's the answer? Like, my whole IG feed is pregnant girls. Like, what? So if you're dealing with that, I think it's also important to remind yourself that, especially on social media, but even if you're like talking to someone face to face, most people, unless they're like a true friend or they just love to trauma dump, they're not going to tell you the reality of their situation. And that's not to say that like anyone getting married, getting engaged, having kids right now, that's not to say they're miserable. I'm sure a lot of them are happy and like satisfied with their decision. But I think because the fairy tale is kind of sold to women of like, get married, have babies, live happily ever after, we kind of expect that, and that's what we think other people have, when, especially when they have something and we don't, or we're just at different stages, or even if, you know, you're in the same stage as someone else, it's like, oh, well, they look like they have it all together. I don't, like, I'm the fuck up. And you see that even in, like, I think of like Desperate Housewives. It's like, I'm not a good mom, I'm not a good wife, like I just feel like I'm failing constantly. Life still goes on after you get married, after you have kids. I have not done either of those things, so I can't speak to that from personal experience, but just from observing, you know, women who have gone through those things talk about it. It's like, there's still pressure, there's still stress, your marriage changes after you have kids. You change after you have kids, and life is still life. So the perfect fairy tale doesn't exist. And basically, that is all to say, don't compare yourself in your journey, especially if you're single, trying to figure it out. And then there's people on your feed like getting engaged, my engagement photos, my maternity photos, this and that, because their life isn't perfect too. They could be very happy and have a great relationship, God bless, but that doesn't mean their life is perfect. Nobody's life is perfect. It's also, that saying, wherever you go, there you are. And it's more so about your own inner world and how you are perceiving a situation. So if you are, again, single and feeling that pressure to settle down or couple up or find someone, changing the lens through which you're looking at your life and your situation. Like, damn, there's probably, and it's not about comparison, but just to kind of put things in perspective, it's like maybe you're looking at TikToks like, what my boyfriend got me for Valentine's Day, or my life as a stay-at-home mom, morning routine. You're like, oh, I wish that was me. But maybe they're watching videos like single girly day in my life, and they're like, wow, like she has all this time to herself. She doesn't have to deal with her man leaving Miranda and Steve his poop-stained underwear around. She is probably getting enough sleep at night. She has the freedom to work out, to do errands at any time of day. Everything in life is kind of a give and take. But with that being said as well, especially when it comes to having relationships with men, I think it's really important to, again, be strict and have those high standards, because you don't, again, want to be in an actually bad situation. Not to blame women, because it's not like women's fault, because it's literally patriarchy and society, but a lot of women will settle for a guy and literally marry them and have kids with them and live with them just because they feel like that's what they're supposed to do, or they're facing those pressures from society, from their family. They're ultimately unsatisfied. So when you think of, everything in that sense, it kind of, at least for me, takes the pressure off, because it's like, I don't just want to settle for a random and then in 10 years be like annoyed because he won't like do the dishes, to say the least, like literally to say the least. If I want to find someone, I'm gonna find someone worthy that is going to enhance my life, add to it, and not drag me down. And in the meantime, I'm gonna focus on myself, my hobbies, my friends, like checking things off my bucket list, just focusing on my own happiness. So I hope that makes sense. I would love to hear your thoughts on this subject. If you're single, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, what has your experience been like, and what's the advice you would give the girlies, or what's something that you learned that you wish you knew earlier? Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to follow, because I post new episodes every Thursday, and I will see you guys next week.